Work love is the process of finding your true vocation. I talked earlier about British novelist John Brain and his decision to leave a secure job and risk everything to write his first novel, Room at the Top. Brain says, "I didn't change my life because I wanted to be a success. I changed it because I wanted to earn my living by following my true vocation. My job used only a fraction of my talents. In a sense, it really wasn't a job, but an exchange of my time for a regular salary. To sell your time for money is always a bad bargain, because it's wasting one of your most precious assets. If your job doesn't fulfill you, change it, no matter what the consequences. It's the only certain way of changing your life. If you have the wrong job, you have the wrong life. The boredom and frustration will spread through all your waking hours." And Brain continues, "There is, of course, no built-in guarantee of material success if one follows one's true vocation. But on the whole, people who enjoy their jobs make more money than those who don't, for the simple reason that they do their jobs better. They do their jobs better because they're not primarily interested in the money. That's the catch-22 of work." What power in that simple phrase? If you have the wrong job, you have the wrong life. Look into your own heart right now and your own experience and decide whether you have had the wrong job and the wrong life at any time in your past. What did it feel like, and what kept you from immediately changing it? And also examine the truth of that statement. People who enjoy their jobs make more money because they do their jobs better. Do you do work better when you enjoy it? And how does the rest of your life go when you are enjoying your work? The energy and enthusiasm you put into work you love brings you much more fulfillment and much more financial reward than anything you could produce in a dull, demeaning, dissatisfying job that merely builds resentment and frustration. You can only succeed as a total human being when the exchange of love is your main activity. Think about that. The exchange of love. Loving what you do and those you do it with, loving to share it, loving what you receive in return, loving yourself enough to accept the prosperity and a long and youthful and joyful life, accepting that it's exactly what you deserve and loving it. And when you don't enjoy work, the only thing that will keep you doing it is fear of poverty or lack of imagination. That's worth repeating. When you don't enjoy your work, the only thing that will keep you doing it is the fear of poverty or lack of imagination. When you begin to realize that money fears are unrealistic, catastrophic expectations based totally on what others have told you, and also when you begin to realize that you have a huge reservoir of creativity just waiting to be activated, you can let go of unsatisfying, unnourishing, underpaying work. Work love means doing the work you love and loving the work you do. The concept evolved from a simple observation. People who love their work seem to have much more interesting and fulfilling lives. Encountering thousands of people at my workshops and lectures and on talk show appearances and just traveling around the country, I've noticed one basic and indisputable truth. The men and women who exude warmth and a sense of well-being, who seem most alive, who wear the biggest smiles, are those who do work that is pleasurable and exciting for them. It doesn't matter how ordinary or how exalted their job or their profession. In fact, I wrote the book Psychological Immortality based on what I had encountered interviewing people for the chapter called Work Love in my book Money Love, because I found the people that love their work look much younger than their chronological age. And this led me into other investigation and exploration on how people stay young and live much longer. And one way they do that is by doing work they love and believe in. Look at the people who live long: conductors, U.S. senators, artists, productive to the very last day, into their 90s, sometimes over 100. Loving what you do will not only earn you more money and create more pleasure in your life, it will help you live longer. A lot of people have been afraid to take a risk and quit an unsatisfactory job. In fact, I must confess that I get a little squeamish when people tell me, well, they've come to a seminar or they've read Money Love or heard one of my tapes and immediately went out and quit their job. It's a little frightening. And then I realized it wasn't my decision. It was their decision. And it always has worked out. No one has ever written and said, hey, I've really been hurt because I quit this job and did what I wanted to do. No one. Sometimes there's a struggle, but no one has ever regretted doing that. I've never met a single person who has regretted quitting an unsatisfying, dull, dreary, debilitating job, who has quit that job to do something they really believed in and wanted to do. I've never heard one person say, I regret that decision. So think about where you are now in terms of your work. And if you are now doing work you love, how you can go about loving it more. I could also call work love holistic work. The idea that work is not merely a way to put food on the table, but a way in which we can reach our true potential in the use of our minds and our bodies. The difference between holistic work and the work ethic is the difference between emerging from a day's work feeling alive and energized and coming home tired, anxious, emotionally and physically depleted. It's important to have alternative ways of making a living and give yourself a chance to explore some of these alternatives, even if you now love what you're doing. One of the people who has influenced me most in terms of his really innovative thinking is Ray Bradbury, the fantasy writer and visionary. He's very active in making this a better world to live in, working with the people at Disney World, creating new cities, working in undersea development with Jacques Cousteau and his people. Ray Bradbury told me the following story, which I think really illustrates the necessity of looking at alternatives, alternative ways of producing an income, enjoying what you do. He said, first of all, you never know what potentials you have. I'm not saying for a minute that everyone in the world has a fantastic talent, but imagine that you have a fairly good one that you haven't tested. Years ago, a friend of mine, his father died, his mother wasn't well, and he'd had what he thought was a heart attack at the age of 30. It scared the hell out of him. I said, okay, out of the house and to the nearest night school. We're going to take ceramics together, get our hands in the clay and make ourselves over. You know, that kind of cliche thinking. So we got over there, and my friend got his hands in the clay. He'd never done it before in his life. He poo-pooed the whole idea, called it ridiculous. And then he fell in love with ceramics. I helped him build a studio. Within 2 years, he was selling ceramics to Gump's, which is one of the finest shops in the whole world. And out of that came a school, his own ceramics school. When he died a few years ago, 30 years later, he had taught thousands of students from this initial encounter with clay, a talent which he didn't know was in his fingertips. I guess what we're saying is, how do you know what you love if you don't move around into new areas and give yourself a chance to fall in love? I think that story from Ray Bradbury shows that true prosperity is always the result of passion. Feeling passion for one's work unleashes a tremendous supply of energy. The amount of money you receive for your goods or services or ideas is directly related to the amount of loving energy you put out. Too many people wrongly believe that sacrifice and pain produce success. All of us were brought up on tales of historical figures who persevered against tremendous odds before achieving success. What the history books often ignored was the passion which many of these people put into what they were doing. While Thomas Edison did put in long hours and persisted when many others would have given up, he loved what he was doing, and that love kept him going. Not any masochistic need to triumph over adversity. Unfortunately, in our so-called civilized society, many have allowed all the passion to go out of their approach to work. Raymond Chandler perhaps said it best when he described bureaucrats in his book, Little Sister, and I love this line. They are what human beings turn into when they trade life for existence and ambition for security. I saw a good example of the contrast between the traditional attitude toward work and work love in St. Augustine, Florida. I was staying at the beautiful beachfront Bryn Mawr Camp Resort with my motorhome parked just a few feet from the ocean. Really a millionaire's environment, and it only cost $14 a night. I was talking to a neighbor of mine, and I discovered it was his annual vacation. He, his wife, and their 2 children had driven down from Boston to celebrate his yearly release from a job which gave him no satisfaction and only gave him 3 weeks vacation. It was near the end of the stay, and they were obviously unhappy about heading back north. And at the same campground, I met Doug Wilson, who calls himself the Crab Man. Doug earns his living by selling seafood dinners he and his wife prepare at their lovely beach cottage. He delivers a choice of 2 such dinners direct to campsites. Doug loves his work, he laughs and he chats with all the customers. He stops back at the tents and the campers and motorhomes to ask how they enjoyed the meal, and he just glows with joy and satisfaction. This, in turn, makes him a pleasure to have around, and it's certainly a factor in his booming business success. He started out in insurance, and he's been doing what he's doing now for about 5 years, and he's having just too much fun to ever think about doing anything else. There are too few Doug Wilsons in the world. Can you see yourself in this sort of work adventure? No amount of money, no amount of outside interest, no amount of recreational activities can make up for the emotional deprivation of work without pleasure, without challenge, without creative opportunity. Dr. Robert Butler, who's director of the National Institute of Aging and one of those people I talked to, writing Psychological Immortality, said that studies of people around the world with extended lifespans show that the people who often remain vigorous and healthy past their 100th year all have one thing in common. They all remained active, doing some kind of work that satisfied them, and they all had a purpose in life. Famed reporter Adela Rogers St. John's, who's now in her late 80s, believes also that loving one's work is the only way to live long. She said, "If I could be a fairy godmother and give a gift to my various godchildren, what I would give them would be a love of their work. If they loved their work, they would want to go on with it. I still believe that is the basis of a great deal of loving to be alive, loving what you're doing, and then you want to stay alive." Isn't that a wonderful thought? And I think perhaps the secret of longevity and success in life. If they loved their work, they would want to go on with it. Can you say that about yourself? Could you put up a poster, and would it be true, that says, "I love my work, and I want to go on with it"? There's a lady named Kristen White, one of the most noted career counselors in the country. And she says, it's not difficult for most people to get an idea of what they really want. People seem to have real difficulty actually going through with it because of their limitations, barriers, and fears. What are your fears about doing what you really want to do? Do you believe that it won't be successful? That you've put a lot of time and energy into developing whatever you're doing now, and you'd be wasting that, throwing it out the window, if you did what you really loved doing? Each of us has certain basic attitudes, beliefs, and values concerning work. Ask yourself a few questions and see whether in fact they tell you anything at all about your attitudes, about the work you do. First, do I feel good telling others what I do for a living? I often note a tone of apology when someone tells me what they do. When someone has a sense of joy and exuberance telling me about their work, I can usually safely assume that this person is successful and really practicing prosperity consciousness.